Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Shoff Chat. We're very excited to get started this morning, and this is a topic that is of quite a bit of interest to me, and I hope that you will find it as interesting as well. So thank you for joining us. My name is Catherine Coble. I'm a partner here at Shoff, and we are a public relations and advertising firm. And we like to host Shoff Chats as a way to have a conversation with people that we know who are interested in talking about topics that we're interested in, and we think you'll be interested in too. So we hope that you enjoy today's conversation. And to go ahead and get started, I'd like to spend just a little bit of time introducing our guest. Scott Baradell is the CEO and founder of a Dallas-based public relations firm known as Idea Grove. It's one of the top 25 agencies in the country, and it's a 3-time Inc. 5000 company and an Inc. Best Workplaces recipient for 2021 and 2022. Before starting his agency, Scott held a number of other positions, including a chief communications officer for 2 different billion-dollar tech companies. He's also the co-founder and CMO of a venture-backed startup, and he was an award-winning journalist back when he started in his career. Probably, though, my favorite description of Scott is my friend and also my former supervisor from way, way, way too long ago when we were both much, much younger.
What was that your first? That was your first PR job, right?
It wasn't my first, but it was pretty
Okay.
close. It was, I think, maybe my second. And so this was back in the time before anybody knew what Facebook was or what digital PR was. And the
Some
term
people still don't.
influencer. What's that?
Some people still don't.
True. True. And the term influencer was really something we all used just to refer to our parents and our friends. My, how times have changed, right, Scott?
Very much. You went on to bigger. I think you wanted me on here just so, you're this young child and I'm this old man who was your boss. It just, I don't know, just makes me look like I'll go with elder statesman. We'll make it positive.
I like that. I like that. We'll go with that. No, but I always enjoyed my time with you. I felt like I learned so much. And I have to tell, I hope this isn't embarrassing, but I have to tell everybody, you were the first supervisor, you were really the only supervisor who ever had to lay me off. And I learned so much from that experience. And it wasn't a bad experience for me at all. It was very life-changing for me to understand sometimes things are just out of your control. It's how you handle them that's important, right?
We both shed a few tears. That's the first time I ever had to do that. The company had decided, the CEO decided, as an edict across the board with no exceptions, that all people who were in an independent contractor role had to be let go, like all in one day. And Catherine was on the path to being a full-time salaried employee, but at that time her role was she was still a 1099. And we were like, she's doing amazing. How, this doesn't make any sense. Can't you get rid of some of the salaried employees who actually aren't good? But it worked out because Catherine, within a very short period of time, had a great job. You were at Greyhound and other cool companies, and you went on to bigger and better things.
Well, this just goes to show you never burn a bridge and always take the good out of every situation that you encounter, right?
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get into our conversation because I'm super excited to talk more about your book and some of the experiences that you've had. But before we get started with that, I want to launch a quick poll of our audience because I think this will be telling for us to recognize really why companies hire, why brands care about PR. So if everyone will take a quick moment to answer this poll, what are most companies looking for when they hire a PR firm? What do you think they would say that they're looking for? So lots of good answers coming in here. Great. So Scott, I think hopefully you can see those responses there.
Oh, I'm not actually. How do I see this? Let me see. I just see the question.
Okay, let me end the poll and we will take a look at the answers. All right, so can you see those answers there, Scott? What do you think of that?
Well, it makes me feel really bad for the PRSA, for starters, because for those of you who might know, they spent years and got thousands of people involved and had hundreds of submissions for the official definition of PR back in 2012 when they last updated it. And the official definition of what we do as PR people is that we're part of a strategic communications process, creating mutually beneficial relationships between organizations and their publics. But in 18 years of doing Idea Grove, no one has ever asked me for that. So I think you've validated that that's maybe a nice academic definition, but it's not particularly practical. Media coverage. Yeah, we get asked for that all the time, and anyone in PR at a PR firm does. But this was kind of a trick question because media coverage is not really a business goal. It's a tactic. It's a deliverable. It's something that you do towards some goal. But media coverage is not an end in itself. So I would argue that that's not really what they're looking for. It's what they think they need to get what they're looking for, but it's not what they're looking for. Now, when you ask them, what are you looking for? When they say they want media coverage, what they'll typically say is brand awareness or visibility. But then I would argue that that's what they think they're looking for as a business goal. I like that it's a business goal. Brand awareness is a legitimate business goal. But why on earth in 2023 would you come to a PR firm for brand awareness? If I want brand awareness in today's world, thanks to Mark Zuckerberg and the guys at Google and others, I can carefully target my audience and I can follow you around with advertising all day long, much cheaper than getting brand awareness through a PR firm. Now, I might annoy the hell out of you, but I'm going to make you aware of me because all you have to do is visit my website one time and I can terrorize you forever. And that's what many brands do. They create brand awareness that way, very cost efficiently. Is it the right kind of brand awareness though? So I'd say, no, that's not really what you want, what you're looking for when you come to PR firm. I think intuitively, they know they want something else, and that's why they come to us. And what they want, what they can't always put a finger on it, is brand trust, meaning what you're looking for specifically is as a brand, and specifically kind of the mid-market kind of companies that I know we work with and most PR firms work with. You're looking for a better known entity like a media source, the New York Times or the trade publication or the local media that's well known and respected and has credibility to confer that credibility on you. And therefore, that third-party validation encourages the people you're trying to reach to trust you. So that's what people come to PR firms for. And it's kind of the basis for everything I wrote in the book is once we know that what people really want is brand trust, we don't necessarily need to be confined to media relations and our tactics for achieving that.
Yeah, that's great. So the book is Trust Signals. And I have to tell everyone, you really need to go out and buy this book because it is, in my opinion, the single best resource for public relations practitioners who want to practice modern PR, what I would call modern PR, that I have read, and I'm a pretty voracious reader. So it's something that is super practical, and it's something that we're going to talk about today. But before you go out and buy your copy, be aware that we are going to give away several copies to some of the individuals who have registered for today's webinar. So if you've registered, your name will automatically go into the drawing for that. And we have several copies that we'll be sending out to the people that we draw out of that later today. So thank you for—
Also, first book entirely written by ChatGPT.
No.
Just kidding. No, I spent 3 years on it. I hate ChatGPT. I killed myself writing this book.
That's another whole webinar that we'll think about. No, but seriously, we will give away several of those copies. It is a great book. Let's start with the basic premise of it. In the book, you say that public relations is really just about building trust at scale. So tell us what you mean by that, trust at scale.
Well, as I was just describing, ultimately that goal is brand trust. And when I talk about trust at scale, I love to use this. And for you who sometimes have to deal with maybe marketing people who come from a sales background, or a CEO who's very sales oriented, or speaking with sales leaders and getting their buy-in into what you're doing, this is very helpful to use this term trust at scale. Here's why. Salespeople have this kind of they when they do what they do, they know that they can't just go up to someone and say, buy my stuff, here's all the stuff about my product. They know that they will be the worst salesman ever if they do that. They know they need to build rapport, they need to establish a relationship, they need to establish trust before they go in for the sale. And sometimes that takes, hey, yes, they're having to tell the CEO, yes, I know I've had to take this person out for lunch 27 times, but it's going to lead to a sale. This is all part of what salespeople do every day and have done forever. And yet somehow, when it comes to what sales support that marketing should provide, it's always make it about the product, make it about the product. Why are you? No. It's the same thing. What marketing is ultimately trying to do, to make it real simple, is to scale what that salesperson is doing in a one-on-one interaction. And just as the salesperson will fail miserably if they don't try to build a relationship and build trust first, same thing for an organization that's trying to build a brand online. Only 5% of the market you're trying to reach is actually looking to buy your product at any given time. The other 95% is not. So you've got to take that time to build a relationship where you're providing helpful information through thought leadership, where you're showing you care about your communities, where you're showing you're three-dimensional and you're not just selling a product and that's all you care about is making money and selling a product. People, especially people who aren't in the market to buy at that time, are just turned off by that. So that's really what we're talking about when we talk about trust at scale. Is you can't have enough salespeople to touch every single person you might want to reach. That's why you need marketing. Marketing can take the best of the way you as a brand can build trust and use the digital world to make those connections and touch points in a way that will bring people in on their own pace when it's time for them to connect with your brand, and ultimately, when the time is right, to buy your product because they built a relationship and they built trust with you. So I love using that analogy as a way to kind of bring salespeople into this idea that, hey, we love salespeople. All we're trying to do is what you do. And once you kind of stroke their ego a little bit, once you explain it that way, that you're just building trust at scale in the same way that they build trust one-on-one, they start to get it.
Right. That's a great analogy. So I just want to remind everyone that we love questions and observations and sharing. So if you have a question and you want to share it, please do so in the Q&A so that we can be sure that we have an opportunity to send those to Scott and have him weigh in on those. We would love to hear from everyone on the webinar today. Okay, so Scott, you also say in your book that we are living in what you call a post-truth world. What do you mean by that, and how does that really impact the way PR practitioners should be thinking about their work?
Well, I guess what I mean is we don't really have a monoculture anymore in the way we used to, and that makes things much harder. So PR could, before the post-truth world, all right, and before the internet, PR could pretty easily just kind of be the junior partner to the news media. And since most people got their information and their kind of view of the world, view of products, view of whatever through the mainstream news media, and it was a fairly contained, you had a limited number of of voices that were having dramatic influence on public opinion, it was a legitimate strategy to say, well, if we get really good at media relations and building these relationships and knowing how to get journalists at these outlets to write about you, you are going to have a great impact in terms of building trust with the audience you're trying to reach. What has changed is, it first hit me about 10, 12 years ago. I had a client in oil and gas, and here in Texas, where I am, and I scored an interview with the New York Times with them, and they're not a huge company. It was a huge coup. I'd vetted the whole thing. There was no risk in it, right? In terms of it being like some big negative story or something. It was a great opportunity, and the CEO agreed to do it. Then at the last minute, literally, which did not make the reporter happy, he called me up and said, no, he talked to his clients. He talked to some of his other executives, and they said it was not a good idea. No one trusts the New York Times. No one in their business reads the New York Times. If maybe the Wall Street Journal, maybe Fox Business, but why we don't want to waste our time with the New York Times. And so, coming from journalism and being in this a long time, that was like a slap in the face. This was in the world I came from. New York Times is all the news that's fit to print. And that's a very different take. And it was kind of more to come, right? It's only been more that way later. So there's no outlet that everyone believes. All right, that's the lesson, and it gets more so every day. So I would say, post-truth simply means, from my definition, that there is no shared source of truth for people in the way that there used to be. That it's kind of like at the Big Bang, right? At the Big Bang, imagine like what the media universe used to be was like pre-Big Bang, very simple, contained, the very densely packed. And if you could know that, you were good as a media relations person, as a PR person. But then once the internet happened, it began to expand in the same way that the Big Bang happened, at the speed of light, all these particles flying. And all those particles for us are all the different sources of influence that you might need to make the case that you need to make for the audience you're trying to reach. So our world, after this media Big Bang began to happen in the mid-90s and has just only accelerated since with social media and other changes, it's made our world as brands and as PR practitioners more complicated. Unfortunately, too many PR people kind of stuck with this idea that, we'll just do this part and let's just ignore, customer reviews, search presence, influencers, word of mouth, all these other things that are taking over parts, increasing percentage of the things that used to be done by the media. And so that means, just by the sin of omission of not finding more things to pull into PR, our role has diminished to the point where I would say most CEOs consider us, and CMOs consider us, PR, another arrow in the marketing quiver, along with SEO and media buying and everything else, when that's not what we were supposed to be. The idea was PR and marketing were equal, doing different things. That marketing was about selling to customers, and PR was about understanding all the brand's audiences. And PR was about understanding considerations beyond the speeds and feeds of the product, or the product itself, and other considerations like values and community involvement, all those things. These things, ironically, are more important than ever to consumers. It's just that PR has not done a good job of taking this strategic mandate that Edward Bernays and others put out there for us, and modernized the tactics and tools we use to achieve the goal of brand trust, which I think PR people are ultimately best suited to achieve. And in a post-truth world, it's a more difficult task than ever.
Right.
But I think that we're better suited than any other function within an organization to take on that challenge.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. And you talked about this idea that, media relations has, at least in the past, provided that third party validation. And that's a critical component of the 5-part series that you talk about in your book. Talk a little bit more about third party validation. One of the questions we have is, as people have lost trust in those key large media institutions, are there other reliable sources that have kind of taken the place of that when it comes to third party validation? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, it's like the good news in all of this is that maybe mainstream media sources are less trusted or less universally trusted than before. People are more cynical and so forth. People might take, I guess, the optimistic take, but I think it's also backed by science and common sense, is that we always that trust itself is immutable. All right, we can't live without trust. It's like there's this great. Have you ever seen the movie Magnolia? If you haven't seen it, you should see it. There's a character who's very depressed because he's lovelorn. He's never been able to find love, and he's broken down. He's telling this police officer he's about to be arrested for something. It's a long story, but he says, I really do have love to give. I just don't know where to put it. And I think that's what people feel when it comes to trust today. It's like in some cases it's not that they don't want to trust or don't trust. It's that sometimes they have a difficulty figuring out who they can trust. But to answer your question, people tend to cobble together a set of sources that work for them. So that can be media sources. The media is still a very critical part of the equation. It's just that you can't assume as a PR person that some media source like the daily newspaper in your town is going to have the same influence. You could have much more influence with a niche email newsletter in your town that's by an influencer who within a certain group has a lot of respect. So maybe their total audience is a small fraction of what the newspapers is, but it's the right audience for you. So that's where kind of research comes in, but it's influencers, it's customer reviews, it's your Google visibility. All of these are the kinds of sources that in combination, just think about, I'll just give you a quick example to answer your question. So we had a account manager who, she and her husband were having a baby, and they were working in their nursery, and they had gone over budget. The baby was about to arrive, they had gone over budget, and they're like, they still needed to get a crib mattress. So they decided, you know what, let's just buy the cheapest crib mattress we can find. We're already way over budget. And so she was going to do that. She starts Googling. She's going to go find a crib mattress and just purchase based on price. But then it hit her that like a year ago, before she was even pregnant, there was an influencer or creator on Instagram who had been talking about the importance of getting a non-toxic crib mattress. And it was stuck in her head from before she was a buyer. All right. Oh, someone she trusted was telling her, make sure your crib mattress is non-toxic. What does that even mean? So she did a search, non-toxic crib mattresses, because she couldn't remember the name of the mattress that was mentioned, the company. And it popped up in the first 3 results on the first page of Google. And then she made the connection. Oh, that's the mattress that this person was talking about. Then she said, I started to look for reviews online. I went to all these different sources, and we're seeing all these 4 and 5-star reviews, and I found use cases that were very similar to mine. And then I kept researching, and I found an article in a publication called Parents Magazine that was saying that this is a great product. And then finally, I came across some certifying organization that specifically focused on safety and non-toxicity and so forth, that had given this certification to this mattress as well. So then she's back at the company's website and spending twice as much as she planned to spend on that crib mattress because of all of these trust signals. So to answer your question, Parents Magazine in this case was still important. But would she have bought the crib mattress just with the Parents Magazine article? I don't think so. She needed all of those trust signals. She needed the influencer. She needed that the brand had the trust of Google by elevating its presence. That's more important than the traffic you get. It's the fact that Google is saying this is an important source on this topic. All right. It's the Parents Magazine article, but it's the reviews, it's the certification. All of these things together are what form trust today. And if I could just elaborate a little bit more as it relates to the question of who are people trusting and how do you seek that out? Research is essential today in a way that it hasn't been in the past. By the way, research is cheaper today. It doesn't have to cost $1 billion like it did before. But just to give you an idea of the importance, let's think about a few years ago when Nike decided to make Colin Kaepernick the face of a big anniversary campaign they were having. Of course, Colin Kaepernick, extremely controversial figure. You probably can't find many more polarizing figures in the country. You know, back in the days of the 90s of Michael Jordan and Republicans buy sneakers too, which he was famous for saying, the whole idea of brands is let's stay out of this controversial stuff. Well, Nike didn't worry about it. Nike didn't worry that when Colin Kaepernick became its spokesperson, there were people all over social media and Twitter burning their Nikes and so forth. You know why they didn't care or worry at all. You know why they didn't worry at all? Because they did their research and they knew who their customers were. So yeah, they knew there would be this percentage of people that might burn their Nikes on Twitter, but there were going to be all these other people. They knew they had a younger customer base. They knew the mentality of them. They knew the racial composition. They knew all these things. And so they knew that on balance, aligning with Colin Kaepernick was going to sell a lot more sneakers than would be burned. And it ended up proving to be the case in terms of their stock price going through the roof. They had numbers on this campaign itself and how well it did in terms of pushing sneakers. All right. Ultimately, we're a capitalist system. All right. We can have values, but the values need to align with the values of our customers and our audiences. And that takes research today. So just getting in a media outlet that has a broad audience, that doesn't work in today's post-truth world. It's very specific to the audience that you're trying to reach, and to be as accurate as possible in the kind of work that you do and the kind of outreach you do. Research is required in a way that I think it just wasn't before.
Absolutely. Okay, so continuing on the path with that idea of a post-truth world, and we all know the beauty and the perils of social media. And we hear a lot about fake news these days. I found this little article in a PRSA publication just in the last week or two, and I wanted to read a very short little article to you and see what you think about this. It says, the headline is, people who share fake news online believe it more when others approve. When someone shares fake political news on social media, that person's belief in the story increases as other people show their approval of the post with hearts and retweets, a new study finds. Researchers at the University of California, Santa Barbara Center for Information Technology and Society found this social approved effect occurred only when the news was negative and targeted the other political party. Joe Walther, a communications professor and the study's lead author, worked with a team of graduate students to create realistic fake news stories. The researchers posted the fake stories on a website resembling those that publish fabricated news items with the word news in the website address. For the study published in the Journal of Communication, researchers found that when a fake story portrays a politician negatively, the more social approval someone gets for sharing it, and the worse they perceive the person depicted in the story to be. What do you make of that?
I make of it that I'm really glad I'm not in politics. You know, I'm glad I'm not in political PR, because they don't build their brands for themselves. They build their brand by tearing down the other side. And fortunately, for the most part, in the kind of work that most of us do, working for companies and organizations that aren't part of the government, we can focus for the most part on a positive message. I think that that's just, unfortunately, it impacts us every day. That's why it's so depressing to read political news, or to turn on the TV, or to just go on Twitter and see what people are talking about, because the discourse is so negative. But that works in politics. It doesn't work for the most part in the kind of PR that we're doing to sell products and grow companies, because positive messages, I think work better in that context. But it just definitely speaks to a couple of things, that the fact that things that are liked and shared, there's a bandwagon effect. The bandwagon effect is not something new. The idea that that's what actually politicians used to do 100 years ago. They would go through town on a literal bandwagon and have a band on it, and they'd say, "Jump on board," and become a supporter. Well, that's kind of what happens with companies today. Is if you can show that people like you, other people will like you, and you can kind of get the network effects of that. It's why one of the recommendations I have for something that works extremely well, if you're, say, e-commerce or offering something on your website, and there's a decent volume of interest for it, showing that real-time validation of someone just downloaded this thing, someone just bought this product. It has a dramatic increase on sales from people coming to your site. That's true. Things like testimonials on your website, case studies, reviews, whether they're on your site or on a third-party site, they all serve that same function. I guess the other point, and what you mentioned, speaks to just the idea that we increasingly live in echo chambers where we see only one set of things. And so it's important for you as a PR person working for a company, let's say, to understand who your customer base is, who your audiences that you're trying to reach are, and to the extent that they, you can survey them and you can do research on their buyer's journey. You can also do it on, kind of how that started, what sources they that led them to find you in the first place. As you do that kind of research, you can figure out, hey, my audience is more likely to align with this set of sources. Maybe that aligns with an echo chamber. You could be, for example, if you're, we had a client that was doing I don't want to get too, I don't want to give it away, because it's not the most complimentary example, but they had a really cool technology product. It was very visual. We thought it would get TV coverage. It involved drones and things like that. And we thought we can get him on CNN and places like that. He said he only wanted to be on Fox News and Fox Business, and simply because he believed, as the CEO of this company, he didn't believe anyone trusted these other outlets. So he was so in this echo chamber that he was part of, and where no one within the echo chamber had anything nice to say about this other part of the media landscape, that he just believed that that's how it was. And so what we tried, but in that case were unsuccessful in convincing him of, was it doesn't matter what you as the CEO thinks. What matters is that the customer you're trying to reach. From what I can tell of your product, there's no political component to this. So there are a lot of people who think Fox News is fake and think CNN is legitimate. So you've got to kind of figure out, based on your audience, where they're likely to align and where you need to be to reach them in this world of this world of echo chambers and rabbit holes and cancellation. It's a minefield, but you definitely protect yourself when you do the work up front.
So let's take that a little step further. One of the questions we have is about educating clients of the importance of understanding where their audience actually is, what they're paying attention to, what they'll connect with. How do you do that if you have a client that's kind of narrowly focused and they believe one thing because that's their reality, but that's not necessarily representative of their customers? How can you kind of break that out for your client so that they can really understand that and they will embrace the recommendations and the plan that you're trying to lay out for them?
Well, it's a very good question. It's not necessarily the easiest to answer because if you're like me and work with mid-sized clients, even larger clients can be kind of allergic to research. A lot of it is not even the money; it's we don't have time for that. So what we've tried to do is to come up with things that reduce those objections by decreasing the cost and the turnaround time on doing some research that can help you feel more confident that you're targeting the right places to be online. Just as marketers have relied on buyer personas, we do buyer persona research and have done it for a long time. We do qualitative buyer research because we work with B2B tech companies that are primarily selling products that have relatively long sales cycles. They're not small purchases for the most part, and we do research where we talk to we ask for wins and losses out of the customers out of our clients' CRM that we can talk to, recent ones, to understand all parts of the process, including what sources were influential to them. We find out a lot about who the buyers are from that kind of qualitative research. But I think for what we're talking about, in addition to that kind of buyer persona work, you need something that goes broader, because what buyer persona work doesn't include are two things. It doesn't include the importance of non-buyer audiences, and it doesn't include non-product buying factors, which are so important today. Edelman's research and others have shown that there are a lot of people who will buy a product based on a company's values and whether the values align, and the whatever differentiation points that the product or features of the product have are very much secondary. That's not covered by traditional buyer persona development. So what I introduce in the book, and something that we do, is develop trust profiles, we call them. And that involves a quantitative element. And I included in the book an example of what this research looks like, where you're asking, and you can, if your client has a lot of contacts in their database, you can send the survey out. You can offer an incentive like a gift card or contribution to a charity, whatever you'd like to do to get folks to complete a survey that you're positioning it as to help serve you better and to understand you in a way that helps us serve you better. But this is a survey that goes into values, and it goes into media source preferences. It digs into those things, and it might come back and say, you know what, we probably don't want to align with Black Lives Matter, because that's going to alienate our customer base. But we can align with sustainability. They do seem to like that. Now, look, you can say, I'm the CEO and I'm going to align with what I want to align with because it's right. Or you can say, you know what, I have a responsibility as a executive of this organization that has shareholders and people that I'm responsible to, and I need to figure out how to triangulate this so I can do good in a way that my customers want me to, but don't alienate customers so my business fails. That can just
And
only really be done by that kind of research.
sure. And to that point too, like you mentioned the Edelman survey earlier, that same trust barometer survey that they do every year also says, and it's not the first year this has been the case, but that business is the most trusted institution ahead of the media and the government. And so if that's the case, then we as PR practitioners working for those brands actually have a very positive opportunity to use that to not just our advantage, but to society's advantage to bring up and to talk about social purpose, which is becoming such a big part of what so many companies are interested in and what our customers want to know about. So talk a little bit about that, that role of CEOs speaking into social purpose and business being that most trusted institution. Like, do you have recommendations for the marketers and PR practitioners who are representing those brands and how they can take advantage of that, but in a real authentic way?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Let me just to go back to the previous question. What I should have said is, um, in the case of a controversial kind of something that's become a buzzword like Black Lives Matter, there, even if you're as a brand saying, you know what, forget it, diversity is extremely important to us. DEI as a topic and as a cause is not nearly as controversial as a specific movement like Black Lives Matter. And if you just choose, and just like in the case of sustainability, um, sustainability is much less controversial than talking about climate change. All right. So as a brand, all right, this is what we are supposed to do in PR. How do we do the most good for the most people through communication? You can do almost everything you want to do as a brand in your community by aligning with DEI versus Black Lives Matter, by aligning with sustainability versus climate change. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong at all with these movements, all right? It just means they're more polarizing. And you as a brand, can you risk alienating a certain part of your customer base? For some brands, it's not going to matter. For some brands, it's actually taking that bolder stand is going to be a positive. But for some, it's actually going to reduce your voice. So don't you want to have the largest voice you can have for the customer base that is aligned with you? So I just wanted to make that clear that even if you have a direction you want to go, there are ways to frame it that you can bring more people along with you, which kind of has to be the point. Or what are you doing? Just the CEO going, we're going to do this, and then no one follows. So I'm sorry, what I wanted to follow up on that, but remind me what you were just asking so I can speak
Just
to it.
the role that we
Oh,
as PR practitioners can play in elevating, and I mean, according to the Edelman study, CEOs and brands, business have this platform because there's lower trust in government and media, and there's higher trust in the business world. So how do we use that power for good, I guess?
yeah. Well, I talk about something. If I ever write a second book, it might be called The Three-Dimensional Brand, because what we're doing is with our clients now, I used to start the branding sessions I would do when a developing brand message with the question, what do you do? And I try to like catch these guys off guard because it would be like, and they wouldn't have a very tight elevator speech. And I try to get everyone in the room, the leadership, the men and women in the room, to align around very simple, concise ways of describing what they do and how it's different. Well, I don't ask that anymore at the beginning of the sessions. I ask, why do you exist? Much harder question, but that's the question that consumers want to know. Because if you're just around to sell a product and to make money, that's kind of X, not that very exciting to people anymore. It's certainly not motivating. It's not making people want to be a champion for your brand. And so when I talk about three-dimensional branding, what I'm describing is a brand that has a body, head and heart, where the body is your product and your product differentiation. That has to be a key part of your message. For a lot of companies, that's kind of where it stops. But the head is your brain, and it's to have a thought leadership point of view that aligns, that is consistent. It's not just, oh, let's write a bylined article, let's produce some content about blah, blah, blah that's in the news. It's based on who we are and what we believe in. We believe in this vision of the future, or this vision for our industry. And that's so important today. It's like the difference between meeting someone at a party who just wants to talk about themselves and meeting someone at a party who actually has ideas that are interesting to share. That's who you want to be as a brand. So that thought leadership message and being consistent with it in everything you're doing is extremely important. And then third, the heart, that's where the social purpose comes in. That's where it's you actually care about people. So for example, you can say, we had a client, they wanted to align with sustainability, and they had a technology product that reduced paper use, it digitized things. And so that is something that goes towards sustainability. But if you want to have a sustainability message that resonates with people, it can't just go back to your product. You're not some hero in sustainability because your product reduces paper use. That's your product. You're making money off of that. Can you show that it's not just the product that's making you talk about sustainability, but that you care about sustainability, that's one of the reasons you develop the product that way? And how you show that is showing that in other ways, in other areas where you're not making money, like being involved in the community, in planting trees, you name it, things that show that this is more than a tactic to get people to buy your product or think you're a great person by finding a great company for this reason. It's when you align aspects of your product with a point of view of your industry in the future, and showing that you have empathy and caring for the community. That's a three-dimensional approach where you're extending beyond the product itself to other audiences, other interests, to people that aren't in the buying cycle and the people that might never be. But you still want to have a broader positive view of your brand, because people can get canceled today on social media by people who've never and would never be their customer. That's another thing that you protect yourself from, because there's research. Gosh, it was one of the big PR firms, and I'm mad that I can't remember the name. They did a really interesting survey that spoke specifically to the fact that if people believe you have a social purpose, it insulates you from attack. It insulates you from being canceled, because all they know is this bad thing that you're associated with, and they don't have this context of the positive. Then it makes you far more vulnerable. It's another great benefit of having an authentic social purpose. The example I like to give, and I mentioned in the book, is a true story of when I started in my newspaper career. When I started as a journalist, we had hired a new reporter, and she was going to be starting on Monday. And after she was hired, she was invited to a party that Saturday night. And she was probably really nervous because it was a new job. She hadn't met any of these people. So she got really drunk. And she got really drunk, and in a way that was very memorable, because she mistook the dryer for the toilet, the laundry room for the bathroom. It's not the kind of thing that people forget. So let's just say that when she woke up the next day and realized what had happened, she was mortified, and she didn't show up for work on Monday, and she never showed up. She never started in that job. At that time, especially, jobs like that were not the easiest to get, because she just figured she had ruined her reputation forever. But that was the first impression she made by people that didn't know anything else about her. What if she or he had been a reporter who had been with the company for years and had done the same thing? That person would have come in on Monday. They might have taken a little ribbing. Their boss might have said, "I'm a little concerned about you. There's something going on at home you need help with." but she wouldn't have felt like she couldn't have come in. That's the difference between a brand that has built a reputation of trust and context, positive context, that a brand that's just sitting out there talking about their product and then something comes up on social media. That brand is way more vulnerable in situations like that.
Definitely. And so we just have a few minutes left. So as we kind of wrap things up here, I wanted just to revisit the bigger picture of all the things that you talk about in your book. And we've spent a lot of time talking about third-party validation. You've touched on the idea of reputation management. You've briefly mentioned a couple of these other things, but there's basically 5 areas that you talk about in your book: third-party validation, reputation management, user experience, search presence, and thought leadership. Tell us, if a brand has somewhat limited resources, that feels like a lot to tackle, especially if you haven't been doing very much of any of them
Right.
proactively. So what would be your recommendation for how to kind of get started without feeling overwhelmed and without the idea of, stopping and starting? So many times we have the best of intentions when it comes to these types of tactics and areas of focus, but we end up doing just like we write a few blogs and then we don't write anymore. We work on our Glassdoor strategy, but then we don't look at customer reviews. So tell us a little bit about what you would recommend in terms of a way to ramp up into some of these ideas.
That's a good question, and it is a lot. What's good about it being a lot is it gives PR people a broader vision of what they can own, than just media relations. But it is a lot of things. And we talk about, there's a chapter in the book about specifically prioritization and a tool called a wish list, where you're thinking about all the things that you could do um, to achieve your goals, and you prioritize them in terms of basically what's going to deliver the most bang for your buck. And that's in terms of specific strategies and tactics. But in terms of those broader areas, third-party validation and user experience have to come first. You need, and you can have third-party validation in your user experience. In other words, you build a website that resonates with your user, where you understand your user and the language you use, the imagery you use, how you talk about yourself, your product. That's incredibly important, because everything else you do, it's designed to lead people back to your website. That's you online. And if that's not if that's not what it needs to be, all that other work is kind of wasted. So start by making sure you've got a great, what we call, trust-centered website. And that means you're thinking about what's going to build trust. You're not thinking about, if I make this button green instead of red, I'll increase my conversions, which some digital marketing firms might sell, or some creative firm might sell. You need all these pyrotechnics and bells and whistles. Well, depending on the audience, that might just alienate people, or think you're not for them, or think you're too fancy for them, or whatever. So start with who your customer is, understanding them, and building a website for them, which has to include, to be effective at a third-party validation, like testimonials, testimonial videos, case studies, logos of your customers, logos of media outlets you've been in, take your pick, but start by making that as strong as possible. And then you have to figure out ways to get people to that, right? You can't just, we still have clients who say, well, we don't care about search. We just want a website for people that find out about us to go look at it and know that we're legit. I'm like, you're literally going to go from person to person with your salespeople, and that's the only people who you want to know about your website? That's not how it works today. That's not a good strategy. So you've got to go to third-party validation and getting that out there to get referral traffic and people to find you that way. You've got to focus on your search presence. So that's where I'd go from there. But it has to start by building a website that really represents you and shows who you are in a way that can be a connection point. Otherwise, all the other things are designed to get people to that place. So start with that. And that happens all the time. We get calls all the time by people who call and say they want media relations.
Mhm.
And we looked at their website before the call and we say, well, no, have you thought about a new website? Because, we could get the media to look at our pitch and then go to your website. But then once they go to their website, they're going to think you're not serious. They're not going to want to talk to you. So let's not waste all that time and effort until we get the website right.
Right. That's great. That's great advice. Well, thank you. So this has been such a great conversation. There's so much more here that we did not have the time to unpack. So I would highly recommend again that everyone read the book, Trust Signals, that they also consider following you on LinkedIn and or looking at the Idea Grove website as well. And then also you were just telling me earlier today that you are turning parts of the book into a podcast so that people can listen along. Tell us a little bit more about that. What's the plan there?
Yeah, it's called the Trust Signals Podcast, which you can search, and it's on Apple, Spotify, Amazon. But honestly, I've got a separate site from my agency site called trustsignals.com. If you just Google Trust Signals, most of the stuff that comes up will be my content. And so it'll help you. You can find the YouTube channel on it. You can find on the podcast that we just started, it's excerpting the entire audiobook. So you won't have to pay, you don't have to pay for the audiobook. You could just listen to the podcast to get all the same content. If you go to trustsignals.com, I've excerpted the entire book chapter by chapter as blog posts. So I mainly just I'm not trying to make a bunch of money off this book. I just want to get these ideas in front of PR practitioners to help them expand their mind about what they can own and what they can do and what they can be.
That's great. Well, we really appreciate it. We will have a replay of today's Shoff Chat and a summary blog on the Borshoff website, and we'll be sending that out to everyone who registered for the event today. You can also find us on YouTube and on our social channels, and we hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. We'll have some exciting topics coming up later for the rest of this year, so stay tuned for some of those topics coming up. And again, thanks, Scott. It's always good to spend time with you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.